I wanted to continue this discussion about Baltimore. I wanted to get a little in depth in this episode because I wanted to I want people to start talking about Baltimore in a way that, you know, is completely devoid of the politics of the city. And, with me personally, as you know, I've been living here my whole entire life. And I've seen the city just completely deteriorate. But there's been no bigger deterioration of the city than what we're seeing at the Inner Harbor right now. And, you know, even though Brandon Scott has done a good job taking down the murder rate, there's always been this thing in Baltimore where, on one hand, you have crime, and then on the other hand, you have quality of life. Most of the time, when people say, well, crime is down, then that's a good sign that the city is doing well. But that's actually a lie. And it's always been perpetuated. And it seems like Brandon Scott's administration, they tend to say because crime is down in Baltimore, that means that the city is doing well and the city is prospering. But the reality is when you focus so much on crime, you tend to neglect the other aspects that need developing in Baltimore. And one of the things, the economic engine that is Baltimore is the Inner Harbor. Now, I know there's development going on and there's talks about what's going to be done with the Inner Harbor. But I think the biggest problem is there's no businesses being developed in Baltimore. There's no industry here. People have picked up and left the city, and all the tax base that used to be in the city has now fled to the county. And we could say this is a race thing, but it's very deeper than that. For years since we didn't have Donald Schaefer, it seemed like when we got a black mayor, things started to go downhill for the city. There hasn't been, if you think about it, under Kirk Smoke, there was a lot of development going on, but there was also this need to tackle the issue of public housing redevelopment and this thing about getting rid of the high rises because that used to be an eyesore for the city. And it had always been an eyesore for the city for up until maybe 1999. And I know I'm one generation removed from that. I wasn't around with the era of Murphy homes and Lexington Terrace and Lafayette Courts. But when you talk about the history of the city in the last 40, maybe 39 years, Baltimore back then dabbled in a lot of racial politics. And it seemed like Baltimore during that time was in like a kind of like a racial tug of war. Because once Donald Schaefer stepped down, it seemed like the mantle of power started to shift to a black political structure or a black political machine. Because before Kirk Smoke, the city was ran by Irish and Italians. At least that's what I know about Baltimore. And the Irish and the Italians, they ran the city, the Delisandros and the Theodore McKeldens, and then of course Schaefer. And it seemed like throughout the history of the city itself, it seemed to function properly under those mayors. But then when you get to Kirk Schmoke and when you get to Martin O'Malley and then so on and so on, there's just been this constant rule of dysfunction within the government. And there's always been this sense of corruption. And when you call it out, and here's the thing about how why Baltimore will never really change is because if you criticize black elected officials, if you criticize black politicians, it's seen as being racist or is seen as being anti-black. And there's always been like this establishment of power in Baltimore where those who are in power take advantage, and then there's like this structure that we've always had when city elections come around where there be the same candidates. So I remember voting in my first election. This was around like 2008. It would always be Conway, Pugh, Dixon. And then it was like it was always Conway's always popped up on the ballots. So it was Conway, Dixon, Pugh. Conway, in another 4 years, Conway, Dixon, Pugh. And then it's like like these are the only people we had that we were voting for. Well, we had independent candidates, but most of them don't get the benefit of a doubt here in the city, because the old saying used to go that anybody that was Democratic that ran for mayor, if they won the primaries, then they basically won the mayoral seat. So we'd had several. Oh yeah, Mitchell too. I forgot about that. So it was Pugh, Conway, Dixon, and Mitchells. And the Mitchells are a political family in Baltimore. It just seems like the Mitchells like have like this structure in the city that never really contested. It's like all these political families. Like if you're black, you know about Parent Mitchell, you know about Juanita Jackson, and all these other people that were instrumental in the civil rights movement of Baltimore. So when you hear about elected officials running and you know the last name of that political family, you know that they're going to be on the ballot anyway. And then, of course, a majority of them come from Ashburton. And it was always, I always called it the Ashburton political machine. And Ashburton has always been this place where all the black mayors that we've known from Kirk Schmoke to Dixon and the Rawlings, they all come out of Ashburton. And it was always this thing, Ashburton, the Ashburton machine. And they would show up on ballots. And when you have the same type of political machine running the city, nothing really changes. It seemed like the high point for Baltimore was in the early 80s, and then it just kind of like dissipated into drugs, and then also neglect of public housing. And the main thing that the reason why Baltimore stays the way it is, and that the mentality stay the way that they are, is because there's a lack of criticism about black politicians, and especially politicians that aren't on the left. So I wanted to take this episode to really explain how mostly how we as black people, how most of us don't know how to take critique or criticism, because in the sense of being critical towards our elected leaders, it's always going to be seen as being anti-black. But the reality is nothing seems to be improving in Baltimore, because there's too so much focus on crime that we've let other aspects of the city kind of fall to the wayside. And with Mayor Scott, despite the job that he's doing getting the crime down, there has to be a focus on trying to bring some type of economic engine back to downtown Baltimore. Because I shouldn't go on a bus and go downtown and see commercial office buildings being turned into office space. Well, commercial office buildings being turned into luxury apartments. We definitely have a very big problem if you can go downtown and see a lack of usable office space being converted into studio apartments. There's no industry downtown anymore. You walk through downtown, it's like, it's a scary thing. It's like the whole area is left barren and empty. I remember when I was younger and I used to go downtown, I seen people dressed up in suits and going to work and actually working at an office downtown. Now, they used to have hot dog stands at those offices downtown. T. Rowe Price was right there in the early 2000s. Now it's not. There's no functional downtown that we could go to. Baltimore Street is dilapidated and dirty. I imagine that Baltimore Street could have been turned into a theater district a long time ago. Howard Street, which used to be bustling with a lot of stores, with a lot of furniture. There used to be furniture stores down in Howard Street. My parents got their first sets of furniture back in 1992, 93, down on Howard Street. There's no functional commercial space in that area. When you get on a light rail down there, it feels abandoned. It feels like it's not a place you want to be. Now, definitely not a place you want to catch a light rail near. I remember when downtown used to be so jam packed when the circus came to town and you couldn't find a parking space anywhere. Nowadays, I wouldn't even I wouldn't even bring a car downtown. If there's going to be a way to fix Baltimore, we got to focus on there has to be a consensus of focusing on both quality of life instead of focusing all the time on crime. Every time we focus on crime, it's always about trying to bring the murder rate down. But we should be focusing on trying to redevelop the city so that we could bring more people back to Baltimore. More people, they say that, the population is improving, people want to move here. But what is there to do downtown? There's nothing to do downtown. I don't even go downtown that much. We had to redefine what downtown is going to look like. And I don't think Mayor Scott is really focused on that yet. I remember when I used to go downtown, there used to be downtown partnership. Downtown partnership people, they used to clean up the sidewalks, clean up the streets. They had street sweepers late at night. There was always the semblance of maintaining downtown. But now it's like nobody wants to maintain it anymore. It's like, in some ways, the inner harbor has become an afterthought, but it was the economic engine that ran this city. I remember when Planet Hollywood first opened downtown. how excited I was when Planet Hollywood, when we got a Planet Hollywood back in, this was back in like 1999. Imagine how long that was. And it seemed like downtown was being developed for business. And part of that was Kirk Smoke's doing. But we haven't had a mayor since them days to focus on redeveloping downtown Baltimore to where we could get more people back into the city. And that's where most of the issues come from. Why most people don't want to move back. This whole thing of what we value in Baltimore versus what we should uplift is becoming an issue. And I understand, it's a new generation and people got different attitudes about it. But I'm not a big fan of dirt bikes. You can say what you want. I don't care, but I'm not a big fan of a bunch of roving dirt bikes or motorcycles for that matter. Because to me, that's menacing behavior. And I understand that people gonna look at me like I'm being racist if I say I don't like the dirt bike culture in Baltimore. But the truth is, it's a lot of people that are afraid to say what I'm saying, and I feel like I speak for many people that are living in the city that I'm tired of hearing a bunch of dirt bikes going up and revving up downtown. It's not black culture. I don't care what you say. It could never be black culture. We still haven't found a way to fix the dirt bike problem in the city and people running around on ATVs. Like like I feel like that's become starting to become a very permissive thing in Baltimore. Just like with the squeegee thing. When I think about the squeegee thing, they wouldn't allow this shit in New York. People got citations for walking in the middle of the streets and asking people to wash their car or squeegee down their car. No, and it's the issue of quality of life that's problematic because it chases away money. And the fact of the matter is, Baltimore is a city that needs as many resources as it possibly can get. And I feel like, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, I feel like so much permissiveness has led to a lot of white people leaving Baltimore City. And whether you believe it or not, there's like this thing of a tale of two cities. There's white Baltimore and then there's black Baltimore. And it's always been this thing with race in this city. But the way it is now and how it shaped the city, it's become more of a detriment than a positive. Now, I don't like saying that, but when you have dirt bikes roving up and down Pratt Street, when you have people, you know, going around asking to wash your windows for $5 and shit. People stand in the middle of the street, and I hated that. Every time you go to an intersection, people asking you for money. And then it seemed like when you go to the west side of the city, it feels abandoned. I'm talking about once you get to Lexington Market and go on like West Mulberry Street. Um, it seemed like West Mulberry Street is completely a ghost town. Like I wouldn't even want anybody that is my family to even drive through there at night. And then you look at all this stuff like all these abandoned construction projects. The Mayfair theater completely looks like it's abandoned. There's no improvement. No, I don't know what they're going to turn it into, but they haven't really focused so much on trying to improve even the west side of downtown. And it just feels like it feels like two different worlds, you know. And then you go through there and people are speeding. Like you literally playing with your life if you drive through West Mulberry Street, because there's just nothing out there at night. And it just seems like sections and sections and certain pockets of the city just lay abandoned, and especially Old Town Mall, which people continue to say they're gonna they're redeveloping it, and I'm like, redeveloping it into what? What are you redeveloping it into? Or it's just gonna lie dormant for another 10 fucking years? Because if you're an elected official and you're trying to get the city to begin to improve, well, your attention can't be over here while you neglect other aspects of the city. A lot of why Baltimore worked the way that it was because everybody, every mayor that has been in office prioritized the inner harbor. And now that the inner harbor, like all the restaurants are gone, Cheesecake Factory is gone, it just seems like, they don't know what they're going to do with it. And now that you don't have anything at the inner harbor, what's going to happen to the rest of the city? You don't have that, and now it just seems like it's focused on too much aspects of um just too much aspects of neighborhoods and pockets of neighborhoods. And I understand the direction that the mayor is going in, but you had to walk a real big tightrope with these issues because everything can't always be focused on violent crime while you're trying to run a major city and trying to get more money in the tax base injected into the city. Small business communities got to be represented properly. There's got to be a want to want to live in Baltimore and start a business here. And so many people have started businesses in this city and found themselves not being supported. Some have even tried to start businesses on Howard Street to try and inject some type of life into that district. And unfortunately, all of that has failed. There's definitely got to be a way to reinvigorate Howard Street. The mayor's got to focus on how to fix Howard Street because Howard Street is very historic district. You have to get life back into that part of the city because then it could feed into other aspects of downtown and get more tourists to actually want to come to Baltimore. I always thought that maybe a Dave and Buster's would be good at the inner harbor, cause people to want to come down there. I think a theater district on Baltimore Street would be good where people can go see stage plays and actually go to concerts. We've of course we had Ram's Head. I don't know if Ram's Head is still around, but and Power Plant Live, but it's just that I don't see the city improving like other major cities. And mostly that's because unfortunately the racial politics that surround Baltimore, where because we're too black of a city, there's not really a lot of space for there to be this kind of mosaic of racial harmony that other major cities have, like Philadelphia or Chicago or Detroit. We don't have that mosaic. We used to have that mosaic feel to a city. Like you knew Eastern Avenue was like Little Mexico or Little El Salvador. Then there was Greektown, which is still around. But, you know, back then when I was younger, every neighborhood had its ethnic feel to it. Little Italy had its ethnic feel to it. Lombard Street had its ethnic feel with Jewish synagogues and Jewish delicatessens, corned beef roll. And it doesn't feel like that anymore. Feels like people have abandoned downtown Baltimore. And actually, the whole entire city together. But it's also black folks gotta learn how to take honest criticism about what it is that we promote as part of being a part of our culture and a part of our pride, and music glorifying the violence of the city and the bike culture and running around popping willies on ATVs and bikes. That's not a part of our culture and shouldn't be a part of our culture. Because fact of the matter is ATVs are off-road vehicles. Thing about it is creates disturbance and tension for people that want to do business in the city. And business is very important in the city because it helps to feed the ecosystem of a lot of programs that we need for the youth. So when people say, oh, well, these kids need programs so they can stay out of trouble. Well, how do you think they're going to get these programs if businesses don't want to do business here because of how your child acts out in public? Like I said, it feeds into an ecosystem. We want to talk about, well, it's because of racism that the city is the way that it is. No, it's because you over prioritize certain negative aspects of Baltimore over trying to promote more positive aspects, you know, and having a bunch of the crap down in Baltimore, down in downtown Baltimore, having all that crap, having all these team meetups, tearing up other people's property. That's not good. There has to be accountability there. But it's also important that we acknowledge that, yeah, certain things that we do is chasing out the money and chasing out all the businesses in Baltimore. There has to be a racial balance in Baltimore. White Baltimoreans, they're more concerned about doing business, wanting to do business in the city, wanting to open up bars, wanting to, have, simple things just to run a small business because they love Baltimore just as much as we love Baltimore. But we also have to make a space for them in order to feel comfortable in these neighborhoods. You know, you got a lot of people coming from New York, some coming from Philly, and maybe a majority of them are coming from Washington, D.C., and want to move here. But there's nothing there for them. And if we don't make something that people want to come back into the city for, well, you're just going to keep losing more and more residences as time goes along. And it's about time Baltimore start turning a corner where they don't keep promoting the negative aspects and the negative elements of the city. This whole drug culture and this promotion of The Wire and Homicide and all these other TV shows that Baltimore was based on, that were based in Baltimore, of course. We have to turn a corner from that as well. If we're going to get the city back on the right track where we start generating more money. And in order to do that, there are certain aspects you got to tone down and serve up as far as positive aspects. And it seems like critiquing critiquing black folks has become kind of like a minefield nowadays, because the minute you start talking about all of these issues, it's seen as being anti-black, and it's not. But it's either one or the other. If you want to have a functional city that makes money, then you got to be in the process of making space for that. I'm not saying you have to get rid of all the cultural elements that make Baltimore a great city, but you also have to taper it and tamper it, tame it, and balance it with other aspects. You have to share the city with those who are transplants, because that's the only way that we can get more and more businesses to come back to the city. And I want people to come back to Baltimore. This has been another Media Talks TV episode. I'm your host, Tony J. Be sure to hit the like and share and subscribe, and hit the comment box. Tell me what you think. I need your opinions on this. You know, thanks for watching, and we got another video coming up soon. So stay tuned.